Hello, welcome to the 8 folds tutorial. So the folds are the drop fold, diaper fold, pipe fold, half lock fold, zigzag fold, spiral fold, inert fold, and the flying fold. Notice that all of these are based on certain physics that are acting on the specific fabrics. Now, why is it so important? Well, because humans dress in fabrics ever since Eden. So here is a diaper fold and a half lock zigzag fold and a drop fold at the bottom. These folds are bunched folds similar to pipe folds but stiffer fabric, so gravity doesn't affect it in the same way. And then here is a leather jacket with perfect zigzag folds and a half lock fold. So just like we needed the shadow sphere to help us know how to draw like this, and like this, and like this, all based in the shadow sphere, accordingly, to draw something like this, you need knowledge of the fabric folds and the shadow sphere in order to accomplish that. And so instead of just seeing a bunch of fabric, you see zigzag folds, you see a diaper fold, you see inert fold on the ground, and you see a half lock or a pinch fold right there. So that allows you to draw something like this, and that's why it's important to know the fabric folds. So the drop fold is distinguished by being hanging from one point. That's the physics of it. Conical expressions from one point. As the fabric goes down, it relaxes and goes into these S shapes often. You want to be careful not to make the fabric anti-gravity or flaring out too much. You really want a sense of the hang and do everything you can do to preserve that sense of gravity pulling it down. There is no implicit gravity. You have to communicate that. So it's the tension from that one point that really does it. To get the basic forms, once you've got the gesture, go ahead and do some cross contour, avoid super darks in the valley areas. Here's a diaper fold. Again, it's like a drop fold except connected, and it goes from one point, the tension, and then another point. Notice that when I do the arc in between the middle, that I'm not doing it with just one arc, but I'm doing it with a series of straight lines. And that communicates the crimping of the fabrics that often occur. Cross contour helps to define the major planes. Once you've got the basic gesture of the tension and the fabric, notice that I change things to make sure they hang right. I don't just settle for something. If it feels like it's kind of floating up in the air magically and I don't want that, then I'll go ahead and change it. And make sure to not be dark in the valley areas. The pipe fold, I'm going to express at the top and the bottom first in perspective, and then sort of connect those forms. That way I'm thinking of it volumetrically. I'm thinking of it as a top and bottom expression, and then creating cross contours and linear value to help show those forms and how they express. That's about all I'm going to do on that one. Now here's the half lock fold. These next three folds are based on cylindrical fabric going over cylinders, and the cylinder here being my arm. And so I'm thinking in terms of the fabric going around those cylinders and wanting to communicate that. One thing that really helps that is a clear light source. Notice how I'm doing linear value to help communicate the light direction so that I can get a general sense of form early on. I don't want it to just be a bunch of lines. I want it to be a sense of form. The major drama of this fold is in the crimp. So I want to make sure that that gets more emphasis than other parts, just a bit. If I start get too dark in certain areas, I'll lighten it up a bit So make sure the major theme is being communicated. This is the zigzag fold. It's a tricky one. You draw the form underneath, and again, it's a cylindrical piece of cloth that's being compressed downward. So what occurs are these zigzag shapes or these diamond-like puckering that goes on. So when I'm drawing these lines, I'm thinking in terms of going from front to back and creating these forms that are these zigzags or puckers. Their compression. Also, really important is making a dark side, choosing a side to be dark so that you can see it as an overall value form. This drawing needs a bit of work, but it's about all I have time for now. So the spiral is another 2 cylinders, slightly crimping, which is my hand and arm. And I'm thinking of the fabric going around these forms rather than just drawing diagonal lines on it. These diagonal lines are going from front to back. And then fairly early on, I get a sense of the light source. So that I can get an overall sense of the form, and I start believing myself where the how the form is moving. Now, when you've got something repetitive like these diagonal striations, sometimes you get too repetitive, and part of the job of the artist is to break up things when they get a little too predictable, which can start looking unrealistic. So I'll be going through here and sort of making slight changes to break up the rhythm a little bit. And a lot of that just comes from going back and looking at what's going on actually, rather than just sort of staying in my habituated mark-making modality. The inert fold needs to be thought of as being on a flat plane. You want to think of the fabric being closer to you and then moving away from you, having a strong sense of two-point bias so that you can do cross contour, get the major forms with linear value. It's much easier to do it this way than this photo where you're just kind of looking down on a strange topography. Also, shadows, contact shadows, cast shadows really help place the fabric down on the ground plane and help identify it clearly and give it some context. Inert folds, I think, are some of the most difficult because there's no overall sense of structure. Everything is sort of on its own. You don't have a unifying principle as much. So it takes a little more work and time to get these to really work out. But if you take a strong perspective opinion on it, it does help a lot. So the last one is the flying fold, and this is my idea of what a flying fold is. I'm not actually coming from the photograph. I'm just sort of saying, hey, this is what I think. It's being held by a point, and then it's flapping in the wind. And what happens when it flaps in the wind is you get these like pointy kind of things. It starts looking like a banana, sort of, because I keep repeating the same sort of motif over and over. I'm trying to get the forms in here, but it's I could keep working on this, but it's kind of diminishing returns, and my imagination isn't strong enough. So I'm going to actually look at the photograph and start working on it. And one thing I'm fairly clear about is I want to retain the theme of depth of the two back flaps being further away than the forward fold, which is more like a sail that's catching the wind, while the other two are flapping in the wind. So I'm trying to communicate that depth, keep that sense of going, and then also the different tensions that are being played out. There's the tension of the arc of the foreground thing as it catches the wind and holds it. And then there's the flapping in the wind of the forms in the back. And so I want to make sure that my line hierarchy is communicating those essential things, that I don't have interior darks starting to flatten things out or pop out, but that the spirit of the depth and the tension and the release is being retained. So when you're doing fabric, you want to have a clear two-point bias opinion, and you also want to have a clear sense of what's underneath the fabric. It's making it do what it's doing, or where it's hanging from. It's those things that really communicate what's going on, and allow you to do like a cross contour like that. So we're going to be doing fabric over chair. Drawing a clear chair in perspective correctly is totally key. You've got to do it. This is fairly in perspective here. The fabric gets a little hard-edged. This is nicely in perspective. Could be less high contrast darks in the light area. This is beautiful fabric, and the perspective's a little weird down at the base. This is too forced perspective, and in general too high contrast, and I don't get any sense of the chair here. It's melting or being abducted by aliens. It's floating up in space. So there's that. And avoid 1 point horizontal axis and tangencies, and please crop your work. So this is more of a symbolic way of drawing, which is good and communicates essential tensions and releases. This is more of a realistic method, which is communicating the same thing. So know the difference, and know what these folds are, and know what these folds are, and have enjoyment with the folds. That's it.